My name's Terry Wealand. I'm a lieutenant with the Harrisburg City Police. Behind me, you have Officer Mark Hall with the Harrisburg City Police and Detective Kirk Aldridge with the Harrisburg City Police. Before we get started, I want to show you guys a little video clip here just to show you a little bit. I mean, this is a little dated, but just to kind of get everybody in the right frame of mind here with what exactly we try to accomplish.
This is the city. Los Angeles, California. Some people rob for pleasure. Some rob because it's there. You never know. My name's Friday. I'm a cop. I was working the day watch out of robbery when I got a call from the Acme School Bell Company. There'd been a robbery. There's been a robbery. Yes, sir? What was it? My clappers. Your clappers. Yeah, you know those things inside a bell that makes them clang? The clangers. That's right, we call them clappers in the business. A clapper caper. What's that? Nothing, sir. Now, can I have the facts? What kind of clappers were stolen on this caper? They were copper clappers. And where were they kept? In the closet. Uh-huh. You have any ideas who might have taken the copper clappers from the closet? Well, just one. I fired a man. He swore he'd get even. What was his name? Claude Cooper. You think he... That's right. I think Claude Cooper copped my copper clappers. Kept in the closet. You know where this Claude Cooper is from? Yeah. Cleveland. That figures. That figures. What makes it worse, they were clean. Clean copper clappers. That's right. Why do you think Cleveland's Claude Cooper would cop your clean copper clappers kept in your closet? Only one reason. What's that? He's a kleptomaniac. Who first discovered the copper clappers were copped? My cleaning woman, Clara Clifford. That figures. Now let me see if I got the facts straight here. Cleaning woman Clara Clifford discovered your clean copper clappers kept in a closet were copped by Claude Cooper, the kleptomaniac from Cleveland. Now, is that about it? One other thing. What's that? If I ever catch kleptomaniac Claude Cooper from Cleveland who copped my clean copper clappers from kept in the closet, yes, I'll clobber him.
Just the facts. All right. Like I said before, my name's Terry Wealand. I'm a lieutenant with the Harrisburg City Police. How we like to start these kind of things off is I give a little bit of bio information about ourselves, okay? So I'll give mine, and I'll give each two of my colleagues here their own opportunities to just not build ourselves up, but we like you people to understand exactly who's talking to you and what kind of education and training and experience we bring to the game, okay? So we kind of legitimize what we're doing, all right? I'm from Middletown, right down the road. I graduated there in 1989. 4 days after I graduated basic training, I left for the United States Marine Corps basic training. I attended Parris Island, South Carolina, graduated out of there, attended School of Infantry in North Carolina, and I was stationed in 29 Palms, California. I was with Weapons Company, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. I did all of my time with that unit. I did 2 tours overseas in Okinawa, Japan. I'm a veteran of the First Gulf War, and I've touched 5 out of the 7 continents that I can remember. I spent a lot of time all over the world. I didn't really spend a lot of time in Southern California, just, you know, in between sets, Panama, Korea, Spain, a lot of time in Mexico. Got out of the Marine Corps, started taking police exams. I got hired at the state prison system. I worked over at Camp Hill as a corrections officer for about 1.5 years, and I was blessed with a job here in our fine city. Ironically enough, this was one of the first police exams that I took once I got out of the service, and it took them about 2 years to decide that they wanted to hire me. But I kind of came back full circle in the hiring process, and here I am. I started out on basic patrol. I worked a lot of 3 to 11 shift and a lot of time on midnight shift. I've been a tactical operator, or rather I was a tactical operator on the Dauphin County Crisis Response Team for 12 years. I was on the entry team, and I also headed up training for the unit. I got out of doing tactical work about 3 years ago now, but I still enjoy training stuff. You know, it gives me the opportunity to come out and reach out to people like you, which is rewarding for me. I had the pleasure of heading up the walking unit out here in the city. I did walking and mountain biking for about 1.5 years, and I did street crimes for about 3 years. And after another short stint on the midnight shift, heading that up, I made my way upstairs, what we call it upstairs, on the 3rd floor in CID, and I'm a lieutenant on the 3rd floor now doing investigations. I say it a lot, I'm not a detective, I don't do detective stuff. I'm a lieutenant now, so I have to do lieutenant stuff, which means I do a lot of this and a lot of this and a lot of this. So, you know, it's rewarding for me. The majority of the work that I do centers around child abuse and all forms of that. I get the question a lot, you know, how do you stomach that? How do you deal with that? And my response is pretty simple. Somebody has to do it, you know, and that's through all the drug work and narcotic work and guns and all that kind of stuff and tactical work that I've done. Dealing with child abuse is probably one of the more, I don't want to say it and sound like off key, but it's one of the more rewarding assignments that I've had, because there's nothing better than locking somebody up who did a kid wrong, you know, whether it's through abuse or neglect or, you know, anything that entails, okay? So being able to facilitate that is very rewarding for me. I'm a family man. I have a wife and 3 lovely daughters. I coach soccer with one of my daughters. I've been doing that now for several years. I ride a lot of motorcycle, and I enjoy working out quite a bit as well, as much as I can. Not that you could tell, but I'm there. So that's me. I hold a lot of credentials as far as instruction with ASP and pepper spray and use of force and all that other kind of stuff that comes along with tactical work and all that. That's where I was just blessed in that part of my career, where I was able to maintain certifications, obtain and maintain certifications. And it doesn't make me a violent person. I think, unfortunately, it always has been like that. I don't want to say in this day and age, a police officer, people in general, have to be capable of committing violence in order to save themselves and others. I'm not a violent person by nature. I say it all the time, and some people think it's kind of a surprise. I'm a man of peace, and I'm very proud to say that. So that's what I bring to the game. That's just a little bit about me. So I'll go ahead, and do you want to start talking first? Sure. All right.
Like was said already, my name is Kirk Aldridge. Just like him, I started off in the Marine Corps. I graduated high school in New Jersey. That's where I'm from originally, in 1988. Went right in the Marine Corps. I was military police, but I had a specialty in we call it SRT, which is the military's version of SWAT, Special Reactionary Team. I went to Terrorism Counteraction School at Camp Hansen. I attended SRT school. And then was assigned to various units throughout the world. I was stationed in Okinawa for 1 year. I was deployed to the Philippines in '89 during the rebel coup attempt they had there. We squashed that coup in a matter of days. They kept us around for a while, went back to Okinawa. I ended up coming back stateside, and I was stationed at Quantico. That's where I really got a lot more of my tactical training. The FBI Academy is right there. We trained every day at the FBI Academy. The flat ranges, the tire house, Hogan's Alley, you probably heard of some of those things. That was like my backyard. I got hired by the city of Harrisburg in May of '93, have served ever since. I did 21 years in the patrol division. I also was a member of the Dauphin County Crisis Response Team for 14 years. During my time there, I was one of the snipers. I attended FBI sniper school, various other shooting schools throughout the Commonwealth and the United States. I actually was a guest sniper instructor for the FBI for 7 years, and I would be sent down to Fort Dix, New Jersey for a couple weeks at a time every year, a few times a year, and I would help them put on the basic and intermediate sniper program the FBI puts out, and that was for the New York Division. During my tenure as an operator with CRT, we got to go to several different training classes. LSU actually has an Academy of Counter-Terrorist Education, and myself and Lieutenant Wealand got to go to their basic tactical operations school, their advanced tactical operations school, their tactical commanders course. I also went through LSU's active shooter response course for law enforcement, and several other schools that we've been to along the same lines. Currently, I'm a detective. I work in the juvenile offender section. My forte, as of right now, is also child crimes against children. Most of it involves physical abuse, neglect, some sexual abuse. But again, out of everything I've done in my career, I have to say that's probably the most rewarding thing. I spent a lot of time as the lieutenant working patrol here on the streets. And I worked on the CP unit, which is now what street crimes unit is. And it was nice to catch bad guys selling drugs or trafficking firearms and things like that. But it was a revolving door. Same players all the time. Nothing really changed. With these investigations with the children, it's probably the best work I've ever done because number one, you're getting those kids in a safe environment, first and foremost. And secondly, you're getting those offenders off the street. So I hope you get a lot out of today's class. We've put together a pretty good course of instruction that's kind of geared towards giving people knowledge, and knowledge is power. And that's half the battle is a little bit of preparation and a little bit of knowledge that can make a difference in a stress-induced environment. A lot of people that are thrown into a situation that's high stress and don't have any prior training or preparation to it, they tend to freeze up. So today we're going to give you options that's going to allow you to make the best decisions based on the moment, and it's going to dramatically increase your chances of survival if in fact you find yourself or your family in a situation where it's high stress. And that can involve a multitude of things. And that's what we like about it. It's tailored so you can apply these principles to almost anything you find yourself in. So I hope you guys enjoy it.
I'm Officer Mark Hall. I've been employed by Harrisburg Bureau of Police since January of '01. Prior to that, I grew up right across the river in Lemoyne and Enola. 1999, I joined the Pennsylvania Army National Guard and served from 1999 until 2013 when I got out. And so, like I said, I joined the police department in 2001, so they kind of overlapped a little bit. 2003, I went to Kosovo, spent a little time in the Balkans, and then in 2009, I went to Iraq. So kind of like the lieutenant said, spent a little time on foreign soil. I'm a member of we call it C platoon or 3rd platoon, 3 to 11 shift, so afternoon into the evening. Statistically, that shift handles most of the call volume for the city because daylight, you have your daytime stuff, your traffic and that. Midnight, you have, if you're out at 2 o'clock in the morning, chances are you're probably up to no good or, less than at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So we see the gamut on our shift. So being a patrol guy, I get to see firsthand what most people are, calls for service are. I am a member of the crisis response team. I've served on there since June of 2008, so coming up on 2 years. I'm an entry guy. That's one of the things that I can say, check the block is one of my favorite things I've done at this agency since I got here. You definitely get put in some situations that, it's always a nice resolution, to help solve somebody, that if someone barricades themselves in a house or something like that, we're the ones that get called. So we get to help out the police because, citizens call 911, who shows up? The police. When the police need help, who do they call? They call the SWAT team. So, that's one of the things I enjoy most. Like Detective Aldridge said, we hope you get some stuff out of this. It says active shooter, but like he said, it's pretty much any active threat. If all you got to do is turn on the TV and watch the news and you see everything from shootings, stabbings, just, people running amok in a mall. So, sit back, take what we have to say, and hopefully you'll pick up something and it'll help you in your day-to-day lives. So, okay.
We're going to show you a video first. And this is the best video we've found that shows exactly what we're talking about. So it's kind of an overview of everything we're going to discuss and talk about today. And, a lot of these things, as I learned in the Marine Corps, you want to keep things real basic, okay? In the Marine Corps, they called it the KISS principle, which stands for keep it simple, stupid. So basically, when you have an active threat, you're going to hear us referring to the run, hide, fight theory, okay? This video talks about the run, hide, fight theory, and it really displays what it's all about. So think of this as an overview to the rest of the afternoon, what we're going to be talking about. It's a pretty good video, so I hope you enjoy it.
It may feel like just another day at the office, but occasionally, life feels more like an action movie than reality. The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces. But sometimes bad people do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the worst. If you were ever to find yourself in the middle of an active shooter event, your survival may depend on whether or not you have a plan. The plan doesn't have to be complicated. There are 3 things you could do that make a difference: run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision. Remember what's important, you, not your stuff. Leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your #1 priority. Once you are out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone and call 911. If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide. Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can. Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. Silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm. As a last resort, if your life is at risk, whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm him. And commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly. The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooter. Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
That was the best video that we've found that incorporates everything. Then what we're going to do is actually go in and break everything down and go slowly, step by step, how and why they came up with those principles of run, hide, fight. And the first thing is, as you can see here, we're not going to PowerPoint you to death, but stats are important. The FBI keeps track of active shooter incidents every year. Now, the most current stats are actually to 2016. But it really doesn't matter because the stats don't change. Only the numbers get higher. But as you can see, from the year 2000 to 2013, there was over 160 active shooter incidents. The average has gone up actually since then, but that's an average of 11.4 incidents annually. During that time, almost 500 people killed, over 500 injured, and 60% of those incidents ended before police arrival. And we're going to go into that and why that's important because a lot of times, by the time the police get there, it's already kind of resolved itself, whether the guy took his own life or whether he escaped or what have you. So, but that's why those stats are important to know because knowledge is power once again. This is another acronym we're going to go into, and it's called ALICE. And we're going to go into each one of these and what they mean. But before I do that, I want people to understand that this is not sequential. So it doesn't mean you have to go in order as you go through these steps. Just like for police use of force, for example. We have a use of force continuum. And it starts off with officer presence, and then verbal commands, and then empty hand control techniques, and then impact weapons, and then like a dog, something like that. The last thing is deadly force. Well, as you can understand, sometimes us as the police might have to go from officer presence right to deadly force if the situation dictates. Well, it's the same thing with these principles here. When something first happens, you might start off with trying to alert your friends that something's going on and or alert the police. But you might go from A right to C, which is counter, which is now you're fighting for your life. So understand as we go through these principles, they are not sequential. You might have to go from one to the other and back to another one and back to another one, so it's very free-flowing. Alert stands for, all are authorized to announce, no codes are used. Now that's really important. You see some schools and businesses would have a code word, like code blue or whatever. Well, that's great if you're staff and you know what code blue means. But what about all the other people in there? They may not know what code blue is. And again, back to the KISS principle. If you have an active threat, call it active threat. And I say that because I want to get away from the term active shooter. It doesn't mean the guy's going to have a gun. He could have a knife, he could have an explosive device, something like that. So I would tell you in your own business or church or whatever, go with plain English. Active threat. Everybody knows what to do if they have a plan, okay? So that's first and foremost. Lockdown. That is only going to be done if you are not able to get out. Through those FBI statistics, 98% of the time, it's a lone shooter, okay? So say whether it's this church or any building, if you know you hear shots like downstairs and all the way in the back, then, and you're here, you know where the shooter isn't, out that door right there. So if you can remove yourself from the situation, that's the first step. So always remember, if you have that time where you hear shots, active shots fired, and it's not where you are, you want to go the other direction. And if you can get out, get out. Because if you're not there, he can't shoot you. Make sense? Okay? Now, if you're in a situation where the shots fired are close and you cannot get out, you want to barricade. Now, that's a lot more than just closing a door and trying to lock it. Okay? Most doors, if someone who's committed to coming in there wants to, they can boot that door open pretty easy. And I can tell you, we've had to boot a lot of doors since we've been cops, and usually it takes 1 or 2 kicks and we're in. Okay? So when this says must include barricade training, we're talking about enhanced barricading. And that would be, if you have an office, for example, you know your office very well. You can have some pre-planning and perhaps like maybe get a cable or a rope and measure how long you need it, where you can put it around your doorknob of your office and tie it off to something solid. Or a step further, even if you have like a big eye hook that you would buy at a hardware store and anchor it into the stud of a wall, or get a masonry eye bolt where you can anchor that in the concrete if you have a concrete floor, but something solid to secure that rope to or that cable. Most shooters, if they can't breach that door right away and get in, they're going to move on to something else. Let's not forget about what their mission is and their objective. It's body count, okay? They're looking for that, that body count. So if they can't get into a door and they try booting it or getting in for a few seconds, they're going to move on to the next thing. So you want to make sure you have that door not just locked, but actually barricaded. You can also, you know, pile things up against the door. Now, if you have time to do that, I would tell you, pile as much as you can, the more the better, and high. And I'll tell you why. If the guy tries shooting through the door, anything I can put in front of that door, in between me and the threat, I want to do that, okay? Most handgun rounds will penetrate most wooden doors, okay? But if I have stuff piled up like cabinets, anything I can find to put there, anything else that bullet has to pass through to get to me, the better. It may not totally stop the bullet, but it might decrease its energy enough where it doesn't come all the way through all that stuff. So first and foremost, you know, try to lock it, but when you barricade, try to stack high if time permits. Anything you can do to deflect bullets, put something else in your favor.
And along that note, if you do, like, depending on the way your office or whatever's laid out, stack stuff in front of the door and then get a 90 degrees away from that door. So if they do shoot through the door, you're not in the path. You know, you're putting your faith into the stuff that's piled up, which may or may not stop it depending on the weapon and system or whatever in place. If you're out of the line of fire, you're going to put yourself safer. So get under your desk or whatever. But the days of just turning off the light and locking the door, that's not working anymore.
This was more for places that have like an intercom system or something, talking about inform. And that's just kind of getting the word out more. I forget the name of the company now, it's terrible. I think it was Tyco. I did a course for Tyco. They actually have kind of like your things you can push, like if you're in a hospital, need a nurse. Anybody can push that button and blue lights flash, and then it puts out a recording, you know, intruder alert, intruder alert. Everybody knows what to do. That might be a little high tech for a small church, but just give you ideas. Maybe you could implement something, whether it's a bell system or anything, where if people hear that, they know it's an active threat symbol or alarm. This goes into the larger companies again. Some of them actually have live feed cameras, and they'll have like a safe room where security is, and they're watching this live feed of the active shooter, and they're actually given play-by-play instructions. So if they're telling you, hey, the shooter's on the 3rd floor, northeast wing, if you're anywhere but there, then you know you can exit the building. You see what I mean? So again, it's live intelligence. Not every place is going to have something like that, but it's nice to have. Counter. This is probably one of the most important things if it comes down to it. This is like the fight section of run, hide, fight. It doesn't mean you need to defeat that person, but you might need to do certain things to try to disrupt his shooting and or incapacitate him, okay? And what I'm going to touch on is how the human mind works. In the military, they talk about the OODA loop, and it stands for OODA, observe, orient, decide, and act. When the human brain wants to do something, like if I want to pick up this can, right, my brain's going to go through that process. If I observe it, I orientate myself to it, I decide, and I act, and I pick it up, okay? If you can interrupt a person's OODA loop, the brain has to start back over again, all right? So when you have someone that's doing anything that's being a threat to you, if you can interrupt that OODA loop, it keeps them from doing what they want to do. And that's why when you notice police, when they're giving commands to a suspect who's not initially complying, they keep repeating the same thing, show me your hands, show me your hands! You see, that disrupts their OODA loop. And a lot of times what happens is, whether they want to listen to you or not, they just start to do what you told them. And next thing you know, they're getting down, okay? It's not that they really want to comply, but you're overloading their sensors. And they just kind of listen to you even though they don't want to. Same thing with a shooter. And the way you do that is you want to have things available if he breaks in, be throwing at him. If you have a group of people and everyone's throwing things at him and screaming and yelling, he's going to have a hard time concentrating on shooting, and it's also going to disrupt his hit ratio, okay? And typical active shooter events where people were told to lock the doors and shelter in place, they weren't taught to fight back. So they were more or less sheep waiting to be slaughtered. So how hard do you think it is when a shooter enters a room and you have a group of people huddled in one corner? How hard do you think it is to just walk up and shoot them? Not very hard. But think of those people would have been trained to actually counter, okay? Instead of being grouped up, we tell people, if you're in a room with a group of people, separate yourselves, okay? He can only shoot in one direction at one time, correct? And if you're a plan to attack him and you disrupt his initial shooting with throwing things, and then you swarm him, meaning you don't have to defeat him, like I said, but if you can get your hands on him, everybody has a limb, and you can take him to the ground, and you have enough people there to control him, you can keep him pinned until the police get there, you see? And I'm sure you're like me, you want to live, right? So when forced in that situation, you're better off at least fighting for your life, number one, and going on with your boots on, you know, not huddling in a corner like a sheep waiting to be slaughtered. So knowledge is power. So know that it's okay to do that. You always have the right to defend yourself, whether it's you go by state law, which is chapter 5 of the Crimes Code, whether you go by what's in the Bible, right? Everybody has the right to defend themselves, and you shouldn't be afraid to take action. And some people too, you know, they might have a hard time thinking that they could hurt another person. So put it in perspective. If you need to think about other things that might motivate you to be able to counter an attack, think of that if that was your children there. What would you do to protect your children? Probably anything. I think any one of us would probably give our own life to save our children if put in that situation. So in fact, you are kind of helping your children, because if you're not there to raise them and be with them, you know, it's almost just as bad. So whatever you got to use to motivate yourself to decide, hey, I'm gonna fight for my life, that's what you want to focus on. We're going to go into deeper things with the counterattack stuff, and we're not going to make you operators, we're not going to make you Marines, okay, in a 2-hour period of instruction, but we're going to give you some ideas of how to effectively control people that anybody can do, and you don't have to be a martial artist or, you know, a fighter to do it, and it's effective things. But just remember the whole OODA loop thing. If you can disrupt their thinking process, they're going to have a hard time taking the action they want to take. Before I forget to touch on it too, what I tell people in an office environment is a lot of people would not be allowed to have a firearm in their workplace because of policies and so forth. But you can still prepare to defend yourself in your office. What I tell people is, you know, a can of soup is legal to have in the office. So I tell people, have a can of soup, maybe get a hunting sock or something to put the soup in. Situation arises, you can put that soup can in the sock and use that for a weapon. Or the can of soup by itself to throw at someone. That'll disrupt their OODA loop. You connect with that. Or even use it as an impact weapon. So I tell people a little bit of pre-planning can help you when something arises. So if you have the same office space or whatever you go to every day, you could have certain things on hand that you know you're going to use if the situation arises, and yet you're still within policy. Can of soup is probably the best thing you can have. Anybody have any questions before we move on about anything we've covered so far? No? Okay. This is our hide or run part, evacuate. As we already touched on, if you can get out, then just get out. It's plain and simple. And knowing that most active shooter incidents only involve one shooter, once again, if you know where he is and he's not right on top of you, and you have an alternate way to go, take it. Because hesitation can also kill. You know, as that shooter's moving through the building, you might have a missed opportunity where now you can't leave because you've waited too long, and now he's coming upon you, and now you're trying to barricade or going right to counter because now you have to fight. So you hate to have a window of opportunity close because of hesitation. So just remember, if you can get out first, get out.
Pretty much, not just for active shooter or active threat things, that's pretty good average for just any general call. You know, I said I'm on patrol, and we handle most of the calls for the city. Your routine, hey, I have a parking problem, some guy's parked in my handicap spot, it's going to be longer than 5 to 6 minutes usually. But on average for the active calls, whether it be a domestic or something like that, you're usually looking at 5 to 6 minutes. Somewhere in that time frame is what we're hoping for. But a lot can happen in 5 to 6 minutes. I mean, we've been up here talking for, you know, probably a good 20 minutes, if not more, and cut that in, you know, half or fifths, and a lot can happen as far as an active threat. So that's your average. So what he was saying about preparing yourself ahead of time, you can actually, you know, lessen the activity that the shooter or the threat can accomplish in that 5 to 6 minutes. Everybody remembers Columbine from 1999, the high school in Colorado, right? There was 12 wounded, 10 killed, and we're going to get to it a little bit later of how that could have been affected had they employed some of the techniques we're talking about. Virginia Tech, you had 30 killed, 17 wounded. And Sandy Hook, you had 2 wounded and 26 killed. So things are going up. Like he said about, you know, wanting that body count. Like these guys that do this, they want to make the news. They want to get as many kills as possible in as little as time. And the reason why most of them are in before the police get there in that 5 to 6 minutes is because they get what they can, and when the police do show up, most of them kill themselves. And there's been a few that have been taken into custody, but for the most part, they kill themselves or a civilian or somebody interacts. Everybody remembers the fire drill, right? Tornado drill from school, right? Is this really any different as far as, like, you know, preparing yourself? Everybody's prepared for the fire, but when was the last time somebody in a school died in a fire? I don't even remember the year, but we all did them as kids growing up. So now a lot of schools are going to the active shooter drills or active threat drills. We talked a little bit about some of the flight counter strategies. Flight, evacuate, get out the door, but, you know, kind of like with a fire, you might have to remember that your closest exit may be behind you. Everybody's heard that on a plane, about your closest exit may be behind you. It's no different than your office or just church or anything like that. If you're sitting in this front pew, your exit might be faster just to go across the altar and down out the back, as opposed to going out the back door.
Yeah, this here talks about, like, the 3 natural responses of human beings, okay? And fight or flight kind of go together. What you don't want to do is freeze. Some people will freeze in a critical incident because they have no preparation or prior training in it, okay? So that's why this is important. It keeps you from freezing and having the hesitation that can make things worse or get you killed. So we want to get you to the point where you're using the body's natural responses of fight or flight to either get out, properly barricade, and or counter or fight for your life. So we want to steer away from freeze. This is which is preferred? Definitely the first 2. You don't want to freeze in a situation. And that's the best part about this whole thing, is it gives you knowledge. Again, I'll say it 100 times, knowledge is power. If you have an idea of what you want to do, then you kind of fight as you train and train as you fight. That was something else we learned in the Marine Corps, and it is true. If nothing else, you resort back to what you might have up here from life experience or training or things that have worked out before in your favor. So you want to start putting these things in your mental toolbox, okay, and do some preparation on your own time so that when presented with a threat, you know how you're going to respond, you know what you're going to do, and it's going to be carried out right away instead of pondering. We don't want you guys to freeze. It's important to understand this just so you understand why we're telling you everything we're telling you. All but 2 incidents of those 160 some we talked about involved a single shooter. With the duration of the incident could be determined, 69% of the incidents ended in 5 minutes or less, and 90% of the incidents studied, the incident ended on the shooter's initiative. And all but 6 incidents, the shooter was male. So typically it is a male shooter. But again, you know, you want to be prepared so that you know that by the time the police get there, we may not be there and actually stop it in time. So anything you can do to remove yourself from the situation or to counter that shooter and either pin him down or incapacitate him, you're actually saving lives as well as your own. And it's not something that the police can do by themselves. We're going to do everything we can. But the main thing is us getting there and actually getting in there and putting pressure on that shooter. Little pie chart for you. That's actually changed a little bit. These are 2013 stats. I believe if we had an updated one, you'd probably see more attacks in houses of worship. And probably houses of worship would have increased. There is a terrorist magazine on the internet called Inspire Magazine. And some of the articles are used for people that are sympathetic to the terrorist cause. And what they've been promoting in Inspire Magazine is lone wolf attacks, okay? And why? Because they're easy, number one. Number two, if it's a single person making the threat, it's harder for the intelligence community to pick up on what that one person might have going on in their head. And it's pretty easy preparation. They're also calling for people not only to use guns, but to use knives. And things that we start seeing overseas eventually are going to make their way here to our country, okay? And we've already seen in Europe, for example, more attacks with people using cars in an open environment of just driving cars into groups of people, or people armed with edged weapons, whether it's machetes or other knives, attacking people. I hope we don't see it here, but we probably will. Most things that start occurring overseas is kind of a preface to what we're going to see here in America. So this pie chart's probably a little bit off because there have been more attacks lately at houses of worship, but also know that Inspire Magazine is calling for people that want to support terrorist activities to target churches. So just keep that in mind. This kind of goes into some of the history. School violence, talking about school shootings. It's not anything new, and I didn't know this till I went through the course myself. The earliest recorded school shooting was right here in Pennsylvania, July 26th of 1764, where Lenape Indians entered a schoolhouse and shot and killed a schoolmaster and either 9 or 10 kids. Only 3 kids survived in that. So here, the same thing we're seeing nowadays, it happened. 1764. Hard to believe. Again, this is old information. 2014, there were 24 reported school shootings. 12 of those were in elementary, middle, and high school settings. We've probably already went way past 24, unfortunately, in today's world. Let's talk about what an active shooter is. An active shooter is an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. Like we talked about, that target-rich environment. In most cases, active shooters use firearms and there is no pattern or method to their selection of victims. Active shooter situations are unpredictable and evolve quickly. Typically, the immediate deployment of law enforcement is required to stop the shooting and mitigate harm to victims. Because active shooter situations are often over before law enforcement arrives, individuals must be prepared both mentally and physically to deal with an active shooter situation or active threat. as I like to say. Now, this is stuff you could apply to everything. Probably because I was a Marine, I've been a cop for almost 25 years. Anytime I'm off duty and I'm with my family and I go to a restaurant or I go to anywhere, guess what I'm looking for? I'm looking for any potential threats. I'm looking for the nearest exits. I want to know ahead of time which way I'm going if I have to get out of the building. You know, things like that. But you should do the same. And I won't put my back to anything open. If I'm in a restaurant, I usually want something where my back is facing a wall. That way I know nothing's coming from behind me, you know. So it's been ingrained in me to have situational awareness. And we're not asking you guys to be paranoid. You know, you still got to live and relax and enjoy life and have fun. But simple things such as just kind of taking notice of where exits are, any place you might be, it's a good thing to start doing. A lot of this we kind of touched on already. I did tell this to the pastor before we started. This statement here is really important. If you are at an office setting or you're here in church today, other parishioners or other people around you are going to probably mock or do what you do. So if you're a teacher or an office manager or anything, no matter where you find yourself, if you're there and no one else is doing anything and you start saying, hey, let's go, we got to get out, let's go, people will probably listen. So you might have to take lead and get people to follow your actions. And unfortunately, a lot of people, you know, they don't mean to be sheep, but they are. They've never thought of something bad happening and what will I do? So we need you guys to take this out there and remember that you might have to be a leader, whether you want to be or not. But especially like in an office environment or a church environment, they're going to probably listen to the pastor or whoever it is that's kind of working there and in charge. They're going to follow your lead. So it's this is the first step in trying to get the word out to other people, but just know you might be the leader that people don't know they want, but the one they need, okay? This is kind of one of those case in point things. This is the library at Columbine High School, okay? It's hard to see, but this is one of the main hallways going down through the school, okay? And this right here is the library. Now, if you remember in that incident, there was a lot of students that sheltered in place. Why? That's what the policy was at the time. And that librarian did the best he could because he followed what the policy was. Lock the door, shelter in place. Well, what happened? The shooters came down here and just stepped on top of these tables and went table to table and shot people, okay? Now, here's the important thing. There was an exit right out through here, okay? So if you follow these arrows, they could have went right through the library, out this door, out this back hallway, right to the outside. So just like we've been telling you about if you have the opportunity or the avenue to escape, you should take it. This is a prime example. Had they had active shooter response training and they heard the shooter coming down this hall shooting and they know he's in this hallway, they would have known, hey, we can run right through here. We're also creating distance and space between us and the threat, okay? But also we're getting outside and we're removing ourselves from that equation of being targets for that shooter. And it's a shame, but you live and learn. This was also a big learning tool for law enforcement. Up to that point, the policy was patrol responds, they secure a perimeter, and we call SWAT. Well, that sounds good on paper. But in reality, even for us, for Dauphin County CRT, it takes about an hour before we're operational. You know, it's made up of officers from all over the county, and we have to respond to a staging area. We have to get a briefing, and we have to deploy and everything else. So it's about an hour before we're fully operational. Now, if it's something that's kicking off like an active shooter and the pagers go off, as guys come in, we're going to be sending them. So it's going to be a little quicker response, but still, it won't be quicker than what patrol is. So after Columbine is when they started to develop active shooter strategies and tactics, and it became mandatory for all police to go through it. Now, I was already an officer when that happened, so I remember shortly after Columbine, it was part of our mandatory in-service training. So every police officer in Pennsylvania, by state law, had to go through active shooter response training. And that's when the tactics changed for us, which is, hey, as soon as you get on scene, you're going in.
Remember what he said about what a definition of an active shooter is? Someone is actively engaging. So now, along those tactics he's talking about changing are, as a patrol officer, we get a report, hey, let's use this church or the high school or something like that. There's an active shooter. You're going to have myself and some other patrol guys. We're just going to form how many ever the first couple guys there, we're going to come in and address the threat, as opposed to waiting, like he said, for the SWAT team to arrive. In that video, that first video where the guy was walking through with a shotgun, that was a little misleading, showing the guys in the body armor walking around. That's not the immediate response. The immediate response is going to be the guys in the blue uniforms for Harrisburg, or whatever color uniforms they are. So.
And it's been kind of neat too that I've seen the evolution of active shooter response for everyone, for law enforcement and for civilians. Because when they first put it out to us, even if you were the first guy on scene, they wanted us to wait for 2 other cops or 3 other cops and then make a tactical T, they would call it, and you go in together. Well, now we're proposing single officer response, where, hey, if you're the first one there, you're going in. And the reason is, like I said before, most active shooters, they're actually cowards, okay? And they don't want to fight the police, and they don't want to get in a shootout with the police. So the sooner the police can enter a building and put pressure on that shooter, they usually start worrying about that police officer or the police coming for them, and they stop their active killing because now they're looking for a place to barricade or hide, or we force them into a spot where they kill themselves. But nonetheless, I don't care whether of each occurs first. What I do care about is when he knows that the police are in there, we're putting pressure on that shooter, he's not actively killing people anymore. He's either trying to barricade himself or he's going to kill himself. So that's why anymore it's proposed that we do single or double officer entries immediately and not wait for a team of 3 to 5 cops to get there. This kind of goes about what we're talking about already, about preparation. Wherever you are, you should have escape route in mind. Evacuate regardless of if others agree or not. You're going to have some people that are just so scared they won't want to move. Okay, and they might go to that freeze mode. Instead of fight or flight, they might just freeze. Now, you don't want to let them hold you up, but you might want to try to get people to follow you. Like, hey, come on, we got to go right now. Now, understand too, when someone is in that mode of freeze, okay, they might have a mental block, and you might have to kind of wake them up. And I've seen it even in first responders, where you might have to say, hey, let's go. We got to go now. You know what I mean? And most people be like, oh, okay. And now they're following you. But if someone outright refuses to come with you, don't keep debating with them. Just go ahead and go. Worry about yourself. Don't worry about grabbing your pocketbook or your laptop or anything else. None of those things matter. All your material things do not matter. Your life matters. Leave all that stuff behind. Like I touched on, to help others escape if possible. Once you're in a safe spot, you want to prevent other people from going in the building, obviously. You want to keep your hands visible. That's more for the police as they arrive. You want to follow the instructions of cops, and they don't want you to help wounded people at that point. You got to get yourself out. Now, if you have a walking wounded, meaning someone got hit maybe in the arm or the leg, but they're still walking, it's okay to help them get out. But if someone's immobilized or incapacitated, they don't propose trying to do a fireman's carry and carrying this person out. The most important thing is getting yourself out at that point and then calling 911. We're going to go into it more, but I want to touch on it real quick. If you're in a building, we have an active threat, and the police get there, of course, we don't know who you guys are, if you're a bad guy or a good guy. The most important thing I could tell you is you want to keep your hands visible, and the best way to do that is to raise your hands up and spread your fingers. And I'm going to tell you why that's important. It's easier to pick up seeing an empty palm with hands spread, knowing there's no type of weapon in my hands. Because you got to remember too, this is a high stress incident, okay? And if you kind of have your hands differently than like this, it might be hard for the police to tell at first if you have something in your hand or not. So it's kind of helping us help you by understanding and realizing immediately upon seeing you that you are not a threat. And they also suggest, we have a slide on it, but they also suggest not yelling and shouting and pointing at the police. If they ask you, hey, where's the shooter? What's he wearing? Respond to it. But if they already know that, they may not say anything to you. They might already have reports of what he's wearing or what have you, or there's active gunfire, they don't want to deal with you at all. They might tell you, keep moving, go, 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 and they're going to go towards the sounds of the guns, okay? And that leads me to something else. If you find yourself in a hallway in between, where you are and an escape route, and you're not sure which way to go, if you see police officers coming down a certain hall or coming in through a certain door, that's also going to tell you where the shooter isn't. So they might tell you, yep, keep going, go out that door right there. So if you see where the police are coming in or where they just came from, the area's probably been cleared, and that's probably your best avenue of walking or running to get out, because the threat's not there. Just food for thought.
And along that line is, it hit on it in that first video, but the initial responding officers aren't there to help the guy that's laying there shot on the ground. We're not there to make sure he gets out okay. We're there to engage the threat. So it's high stress. We're gonna be yelling, where's he at, where's he at? And that's when you can point or say, hey, he went that way. But like Detective Aldridge said, if you see us coming from that way, but we're gonna be bypassing people. We're gonna be like, you okay? And we're going looking for the threat. Once the threat is neutralized, contained, whatever, there will be follow-on teams that come in to help address the wounded and get everybody out.
Again, it just touches on only 2% of violent intruder events have been have been committed by more than one person at a time. If he's inside, you get outside. I don't care what you do if you get out of the building. A lot of when active shooter response for civilians first came out, they were real big on telling people to have predetermined rally points of where you should meet up. Just like in the old fire drills in school, you'd usually go out in the school parking lot, and that was your meeting place. They've kind of gotten away from that because, again, since 9/11 and the war on terror, a lot of times terrorists will do one thing to get people in another area to have a secondary event, i.e. the use of explosives or IEDs, okay? So I'm not a real big proponent of having a pre-established rally point that's going to be put out there for everyone, because you also want to think if you have a disgruntled employee or someone who's just, lost their mind that goes to this church, for example, and they want to come back and do harm to the church, for example, if they know where your predetermined rally point is, well, that's real easy. If I can't kill everybody in here, I know where they're going to wind up. So if I have IEDs in place, I can still kill everybody, And same with schools, too. Because with schools, they're so worried about being responsible for the safety of the children that they're real big on telling them, okay, you have to go here. We have to take accountability. We have to get a head count, okay? They're trying to move schools away from that because, again, with a terrorist threat, we don't know if it's a terrorist incident or not, but if it is, they're going to have secondary events in place to take out those kids at the rally points. So what I tell people is this. If you work like in an office building, for example, and you have different sections or different floors, maybe each section should determine their own rally point. But they should make it optional as well, meaning that if you get out, don't feel obligated. You have to go to your section's rally point. If you want to get the heck out of there and go home, fine. But please call in, let us know you're alive. Plus, the police are going to want to talk to you at some point, too. But if you are alive, that's all I care about. Now, there was a couple schools that have instituted the Alice principles, and I forget the state where it happened, but the one school had an active shooter incident. It was an elementary school. And so they taught the kids, hey, just get out. And they didn't have predetermined rally points because of the threats I talked about. So there was two fifth grade boys who ran from the school. They cut through a patch of woods, and they came out to a development with a bunch of newer homes. We're like, what do we do now? So they just sat down on the curb. So thankfully, another adult happened to be coming by, saw these two young boys on the curb, and said, hey, are you guys okay? What's going on? And they said, well, there's an active shooter in our school, so we ran. So the lady called in, said, hey, I have these two boys, they left the school, and they were always getting reports of the active shooter situation at the school, but the kids were fine. And a lot of parents would have a problem with kids just running loose. But here's the thing. Would you rather have your kid alive, or would you rather have them dead? Okay? Now, the chances of your child being abducted or kidnapped are far less likely than if they go to a rally point or stay in the school where they might be killed. You know what I mean? And there hasn't been any kids documented yet that have been lost forever. Now, I understand the schools are worried about accountability and having that head count, but they need to get away from that, because what's more important is that they're out of the school and they're safe. Eventually, they're going to knock on someone's door or see someone, or this day and age, every kid has a cell phone. They might be calling their parents, hey, this happened at school, I just ran. Okay, where are you at? I'm at 13th and Dairy. Okay, stay right there, I'll be right there. You know what I mean? So that's something else you can pass on to your kids or grandkids. I don't care what the school says. When I have 3 sons, they're all grown now. But when they were going to school still, I told them, I said, hey, look, if anything happens, you are not going to shelter in place. I said, if something happens, get out. I don't care what the school says, get out, you know. Now, they had a friend that lived, they went to CD, and they had a friend that lived right on 39, right near CD High. And I always said, hey, go to his house and just go to his backyard and hang out, and then call me or call your mother. Okay, Dad. I said, I don't care if you got to take a chair and break a window out. Get out of that school. Don't stay in there. I didn't like the current policies they had, and they didn't have any enhanced barricading. It was simply shelter in place, lock the door. Well, that's not going to work. So I wanted to put that out there to you. This is not the best example of the enhanced barricading, but like I talked about before, if you have the time to pile things high, whatever you can put up there, you want to put up there, which it may or may not stop a bullet. If it doesn't stop it, it may deflect it, not towards you, you know. It's kind of making wherever you are a harder target, you know. Now, there's a difference between concealment and cover. I wanted to touch on that before I went any further too. Concealment is just something that hides you. Like if I got behind this screen, you can't see me, but could you shoot me through this? Absolutely, it's not going to stop a bullet. Cover is more something solid. This isn't the best thing, but maybe this podium perhaps. It's pretty solid wood. This is probably cover for some handguns, but anything you can find that is going to stop a bullet is cover. So concealment hides you, cover protects you from threats. Something better than this wood podium, I had nothing else here, would be something that's made out of brick, stone, block, concrete, things like that. That's good hard cover. If you can grab something like that, that's your best option. But I wanted to touch on the cover and concealment before I forgot. We've already kind of touched on all this. Same thing, we've already talked about all this. Your hiding place should be out of the shooter's view, obviously. Provide protection if shots are fired. We talked about the cover thing. You don't want to trap or restrict your movement. What they're talking about with that is, I wouldn't suggest trying to hide in a small closet, because you have nowhere to go and you have limited distance, okay? You want to capitalize on whatever distance or space you have. And like he touched on earlier about people getting away from the door and breaking off 90 degrees from that door, you know, like I said before too, if there's one shooter and he has one gun, he can only shoot in one direction at a time. So if you split up your people inside, okay, and you're ready to counter by swarming that individual, you have a better chance of survival if you're split up and you come at him from different angles. But also you're out of the line of fire if you start shooting through that door. Those are all things to kind of keep in the back of your mind. And the rest we kind of talked about. Lock the door, block with furniture, silence your phone, hide behind large items, all the things we've touched on already. This is a great example here. This is traditional barricading, moving stuff in front of the door. This, I hope you can see it well, this is improvised barricading. This is one of the best examples we've found. This is one of those push latch doors, okay? They took a 2x4 and a ratchet strap and wrapped it around everything and cranked it down. Well, I can tell you right now, nobody is getting through that door. But if you have doors like that in your facility, that's something you can pre-plan for. How much would it cost to have a 2x4 and cut it 4 feet long and buy a 4-pack of ratchet straps at like Harbor Freight and have them handy? You know what I mean? It's very simple, but no one's getting through that door. That's a great way to improvise. Kind of like I touched on too with maybe having a cable or a rope that you could put around the doorknob of your office and have a solid anchor point.
with that in mind, you know your environment, you know your office, your working space. Don't pile stuff up in front of the door inside your office if the door opens into the hallway. You know,
Or opens out.
or opens out into the hallway. Piling it up isn't going to do anything, and the vice versa. If the door, so know your environment, know what you have at your disposal to use in one of these situations.
This is really interesting. Virginia Tech. This kind of hits the nail on the head in terms of people that didn't have any prior training in active shooter response and people that did. It gives room numbers, and it tells about how many people were present in the room, how many were killed, and how many were injured, okay? And I won't bore you with the numbers, but in all these rooms, usually more than half the people, either half or more than half, were killed or injured in all these rooms. But we come down here to room 205. The people in room 205, a few of them had active shooter response training, and they knew what to do. And they used enhanced barricading, and the shooter was unable to breach room 205. There was 12 people present, 0 killed, 0 wounded. That was the only classroom at Virginia Tech that he tried to get into, and he wasn't successful in killing people because they had enhanced barricading. The other ones, room 206, 14 present, 10 killed, 2 wounded. Hallway, there was 1 officer killed, but he was trying to help. Room 211, 19 people present, 12 killed, 6 injured. The numbers speak for themselves. And this was the first major incident where active shooter response principles really got notoriety because numbers speak for themselves. And it's all the same thing we've been talking about from the FBI stats they've been keeping since 2000. If you employ these tactics and strategies and principles, you're on to survival, you're probably going to live if you follow those principles. If not, with no prior preparation, no prior training, and just being a sheep, you're waiting to be slaughtered. So you had 28 deaths with passive or no resistance whatsoever. With proactive principles, you had 2. That's probably the best demonstration of how and why that works. This talks about the countering. It says, as a last resort, and only when your life is in imminent danger, attempt to disrupt. Acting as aggressively as possible against the shooter, throwing items and improvising weapons, yelling, and committing to your actions. That all sounds great and easy on paper, but you really want to do some soul searching by yourself and mentally prepare yourself that, hey, if I find myself in this situation, I am going to commit to winning. I am going to live. I am going to survive. And have some pre-planning with the soup cans, things like that. Anything else you can think of at your disposal to use as a weapon, just commit to it.
In this room, can anybody name anything that you could use as an improvised weapon? Just looking around. What's that?
Yep, my man.
Stand. Candlesticks. You get a congregation chucking hymnals at somebody's head, that's probably going to distract them a little bit. That fire extinguisher back there. You spray somebody in the face with a fire extinguisher.
And then hit them with it.
And then hit them with it. And then get out the door.
Yep. So, it takes some mental preparation beforehand, but just know that you know what you're going to do. I'll get to you in 1 second. You have a plan, you know what you're going to do, and when the time comes, you're ready to carry that plan out. Yes?
Looking at the doors here, let's just say, God forbid, if a shooter comes here, these are glass doors. We have glass doors also in our house to get ourselves. What do? I'm looking at the doors here. Let's just say, protect yourself with that.
To keep someone from coming in.
Right. You're saying if you can't get out, like we're here and we can't get out, how do we protect ourselves right now? The glass doors, we can't, even if we put something to barricade it, the guys can be.
The thing with these doors right here, I don't know a lot about this building, but I know where I am geographically and everything, but those are doors from the outside. Okay, now when you get out in that vestibule, there may be a cut, down a flight of steps or up a flight of steps or something like that. But that's a way in off the street.
Right.
So if somebody comes walking in that door right there with a machine gun, I'm either going out that door or I know there's a way out down here. So it's about multiple avenues of escape. Okay, you're not going to stop a glass door. You can defeat that with your foot. You can defeat that with a cinder block or a landscaping stone or something you pick up outside. Okay, and anybody that's motivated enough to get into a building, they're going to get in the building. You can't. There's no foolproof way short of putting 3/4 inch plywood up on the door, which isn't happening, to alleviate that. So what I would suggest, and to answer your question, is if somebody's coming through that door that poses some kind of threat, I'm either going out one of these two doors if I can, through that window, that beautiful window if I have to, or I'm going back here behind the altar. You know what I mean? Like just take it's like electricity, the path of least resistance. It's easier for me to go here, it's easier for me to go over there. And if it all or if it boils down to it, that's where your improvised counters and stuff comes in. You know, sometimes you just have to circle the wagons and play the cards that you're dealt
So and I'll talk to you guys later. I don't want to hold everyone up, but we have 3 doors, but they're all leading out to the same hallway. Okay. Long hallway, and then you have 2 exits this way. But I'm looking at they have a lot of exits downstairs, you know, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell the men to run. Because the children need at least one parent alive, right? So as that, you're making it, you know, exactly how it's supposed to be. So what do the women do that are upstairs?
Yeah, if you can't get out, you know, you'll fight. You use numbers to your advantage. If you have, 15, 20 women to one person, believe me, there's strength in numbers, okay?
Back up on soup cans.
Yep. Yep. I suggest chunky style too. But, you know, if you guys are on the same sheet of music, if you take this back and tell them about this, okay, and you guys commit to it, and you guys effectively fight as a team, you can defeat that shooter, okay? And everything we talked about goes into it. Disrupting his OODA loop. Everyone's screaming and shouting and yelling, and you're throwing things at him. And as other ones are still throwing things, other people are flanking him to jump on him and swarm him. The most important thing about swarming, like I said, is you're not beating him up, so to speak, unless you can, okay? But you are controlling him. Everybody grabs a limb. You know, everyone has an arm. There's a couple people on each arm, a couple people on each legs, and the rest of them just pile on and take him to the ground. And I don't care who he is. It could be King Kong. You got 15 women on top of you. You're not getting up. You're not actively killing. And if you can't incapacitate him through the use of physical force, you're at least keeping him out of the fight because he can't do anything. If you guys have to lay on him and keep him pinned for a few minutes till the police get there, it's a win. You know?
You're buying time for somebody else in another room.
And you're still saving lives. If you guys are keeping him tied up and he's not actively killing and you're subduing him, so to speak, that's right. And he's not killing anybody else.
You know, one of the items that I read this in an article a couple weeks ago. Something that it could be sitting right up here on the altar and you wouldn't even know it. And maybe when we do the next one, maybe we'll just like sit something out and see if anybody even recognizes it. You ever see the 20-foot can of Raid that you use to get hornets' nest and all that stuff? What do you think that stuff does if you spray that in somebody's eyes? I mean, it's pretty. And they said that's more effective than what we use as pepper spray. Our pepper spray is not going to go for 20 feet. I could spray you with a 20-foot can of that, the Black Flag or whatever, and you could buy a can of that for less than $5 at a grocery store. And if it's sitting there, you know, and kids know, hey, that's it. I don't want to touch that. Most kids aren't going to mess with it. But if you get somebody coming through that door, and that's what, like what Kirk said about, getting in somebody's loop, getting in their OODA loop. Most people, there's only one person I know that can still fight if they can't see. That's Steven Seagal. He don't live around here. You know what I mean? But if somebody can't see, most people, they can't fight. They can still pull it. What's that?
Not Chuck Connors?
Chuck Norris.
Yeah,
Chuck Norris at an entirely different level. I didn't even want to say his name, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yes.
I mean, if most people, if they can't see, they're not going to be able to fight.
Or at least shoot accurate.
Yeah, or at least shoot accurate.
But I would appreciate if and I'll get in touch with you guys. Our situation is a little different because our prayer halls where we usually congregate are pretty empty. So we have to improvise stuff as far as weapons. It's not loaded like this. You can improvise a lot of weapons in this room. Those rooms are pretty empty because that's the way it's supposed to be. So I'm thinking, my God, we need to really protect ourselves.
Yeah, and it's very unfortunate, in the last 2 years, how many times have you saw that headline, a shooting in a church, and it happened in South Carolina. That was a major case, and however pathetic the actor was, I'll just say it. I mean, I call it what it is. It still happened. So then, unfortunately, we have to talk to people in this manner. We have to come out to the houses of God and talk about this kind of stuff. And we have to custom make your response to order, tell you about stuff that may seem kind of silly, cans of soup and cans of Raid and, things like that. But I know the way that I'm trained, and I never went to a class on how to kill somebody with a soup can, but I've seen it in prison, with different things. And that's where you draw on that life experience. D-cell batteries in a sock, cans of soup in a sock, bar of soap in a sock, 20-foot can of Black Flag wasp killer, fire extinguishers, anything, that you can use to turn it into something to defend yourself or somebody else, and it's the only limits your imagination. You've heard that before as well. All right. The only thing I probably couldn't take is a rose petal and do some damage with it. Does that answer your question? Does that give you 20 so we could parlay at some point and do an on-site walkthrough?
No, this whole training is, thank you very much.
All right.
Very needed.
No problem. Ready for the next slide? Is there anybody else? Comments, questions?
Some people said that they played dead.
As far as somebody passively acting and playing dead, are you asking if we recommend doing that, or?
Well, I think in some of those situations, I think when we were watching on the news, someone said he passed the by because they played dead or something.
Well, I actually have a video, I don't know if I want to show it or not, of the Columbine, big parts of the Columbine shooting, because that whole school was wired, and then somebody actually called 911, one of the kids, or a librarian or somebody from 911, and the phone line was hot the entire time. So what the 911 center out there did was they coordinated that, so they had audio of it. The school wasn't audio wired at that time, but they compared that, and then you had the video, so you can actually see these knuckleheads walking around with, one of them had a machine gun, the other one had a 12-gauge shotgun, and they're walking around as they're going through different things. The library, how these kids were running here, you can see them actually taking shots at one another. And at one point, there is a kid who was shot in the upper torso, and he's kind of staggering around. He sits down at the library table because he couldn't walk anymore. And these two shooters are walking through the library. Now, they didn't shoot him. I think that kid actually didn't make it. I think he passed away at some point. But they're talking to him, and they didn't do anything to him after he was in the library, just kind of sitting there. I guess they figured we'll go shoot somebody else because this kid's not going to make it or nothing. But I know me, I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah.
That's just me. You're either running, you're either getting away, whether it's through a door, another part of the building, out through a window, or you're going to
Or barricading.
Yeah, or you're going to barricade, or you're going to actively resist.
How times are changing, how this is working. What was it, last week? There was a shooting in Kentucky at that school. I just called it up on Google. And the one kid said, "Mom, there's been a shooting." Her kid ran out of the school and called on the cell phone saying, "Mom, there was a shooting. I'm okay. Come pick me up." So and other kids got taken by teachers to safe rooms, to barricade, to whatever. So the times are changing as far as the schools. So the stuff is working.
That's one thing some schools are doing. They're actually designing safe rooms that are designed to barricade and keep intruders out. And they try to get as many kids as they can in there. And once they secure it, they're locked in there. That's pretty progressive. I don't think that's happening yet in Pennsylvania. I wish it would. But yeah, in that incident in Kentucky, there was still loss of life, but not near as much because they employed the run, hide, fight principles, and it worked. Again, you know, just like the thing from Virginia Tech, the one schoolroom where people were trained in it, there were no casualties, you know. So all these things speak for themselves. You start looking at individual incidents and comparing stats. It speaks for itself.
The guy said that there were, I believe it was 23 school shootings so far this year. I'm thinking that's in September, but then the next stat he gave was there were, I think, 111 or something since the school year started for the semester. So what he was talking about was just for January. So, you know, the stat that you have for 2010, I think it was, it showed 11.4. Now there's already been, you know, almost 23 nationwide. And where before, you know, the president is going to visit the schools, now we'd be spending all the time visiting the schools because there have been 20, you know, almost one every other day. I can't figure a reason for that.
Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs.
We don't know the names anymore. They used to do it so that we would know their names, but now it's not even. It was 20 minutes into the news here that they started talking about it.
That may be a tactic. Like we said, what is their goal? Is to get the body count and be famous. I'm the one that did this, right? You know, I may kill myself, I may go out in a blaze of glory, but somebody's going to know my name that I did this. So if it's sad to say, but if we don't talk about it, they don't become famous and they don't get what their wish. You know what I mean? So that some places may have that as a strategy where it'll prevent, well, if I'm not going to get famous, I'm not going to do it. So it's a prevention kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, I wish the media would be better about not releasing the shooter's name. Who cares about him? You know, I just went to a modern terrorist trends seminar down in Virginia. When was that, a week ago? It was January 11th or 13th. And I try to keep up with all the new terrorism trends. And, you know, that's one thing they were really good about. They said, we're going to do case studies on several different active shooter incidents. But what you're not going to hear us say are any of the offenders' names. We're not giving them any credit, you know. And they would just give them like shooter number 1 or shooter number 2. That's all they would say as we went through and broke down the incidents. And I'm like, you know what? I like that. I wish the media was better about not helping their cause by, you know, putting this on the news and giving their name and, hey, they have, you know, ties to ISIS, or let's not say it. No, they're getting better about it, but they don't deserve any credit. I'm sorry?
Is that because he's a minor that we didn't hear his name?
Maybe.
That could be. It would be in Pennsylvania.
This, first of all, I'm so appreciative of what we've heard so far. And I've learned some things. And this is something that you can't answer, I'm sure. But it has always bothered me that guns that are more powerful than the people who are hired to protect us are available easily for anyone to get. More powerful than what you have, or as powerful than what you have. I shouldn't have access to that.
Yeah, but you know what? I'll tell you. I'll have 25 years as a cop here in May, okay? And it's safe to say that we have our own share of problems here in the city. So we deal with people with guns more so than, you know, maybe a township officer, okay? I can't tell you how many guns I've taken off of people or how many shootings I've responded to in almost a quarter century. Most of the guns that we encounter that these bad guys are carrying, they aren't better than what I have. Most of them are like 25s and 38s or older guns. We're not seeing modern firearms like the newest of the new very often. If we do, with something that was just taken in a burglary and just reported stolen. Do you know what I mean?
I'm more speaking about these mass shootings.
Yeah, but they're all legally available. I mean, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but you know, it's kind of troubling that it kind of goes to show you, no matter what law you impose, it's not going to stop someone that's going to break the law in the first place. Most of the gun laws only restrict the honest citizen. You know what I'm saying? Because we're going to abide by the law. If I'm a criminal, I'm not going to Bass Pro Shop to buy something because I probably came and passed a background to buy a gun legally. They're getting it on the street. You see what I mean? But most of these active shooter incidents too, if you look at what weapon was used, it's nothing that's really that high tech. The biggest aftermarket thing we've probably seen was the guy from Vegas, okay? He was using a bump stock. And that just allows you to have a higher rate of fire because again, if you want to have a fully automatic weapon, most of us could probably get one if we wanted to legally, but you have to apply through the ATF and get a tax stamp. So it's a whole long process. It takes about anywhere from 6 months to a year to get approval through the ATF to get a tax stamp to purchase a fully automatic weapon. So again, most criminals, guess what? They couldn't get a tax stamp if they wanted to because of their criminal history, you see. But this gentleman in Vegas here, he didn't need a tax stamp because he got a bump stock, which increases the rate of fire, but it's 100% lawful, just that he was a wacko. So it goes to kind of show, you know, that laws are great to have, you know, but if someone has the motivation and the intent to do harm, they're going to do it. Let's think back years ago before there was firearms. Unfortunately, man has been killing each other since the beginning of time. So we went from rocks and spears and other implements to now we have firearms and explosives. But, you know, evil's always going to be there. And there's always, if they have that will and that motivation and that intent to harm another human being, they're going to do it. Just a matter of what type of means they're going to use, but we're never going to be able to stop it. It's unfortunate because, unfortunately, there's always going to be evil, it seems, until the day that, you know, Christ comes back and takes us all home. But until that day comes, you know, we just got to do what we can to protect ourselves and keep our family safe and our friends safe, and, you know, just use prayer and hope for the best.
You know, let's look at a stat about the first school shooting was the Indians. They killed 9. There was no automatic weapons in 1764. It was all, I mean, we're talking flintlock or something, you know.
Black powder.
So, I mean, if you want to do something, you're going to do it.
It's obvious.
You know,
if you want to do
yeah.
evil, you're going to be able to. It's just that it just seems to be easier to
I don't think so.
carry out mass shootings.
I don't think it's any easier. Just that it seems to be trending more, or it just seems to be happening more, you know. Because some people that aren't from Harrisburg too, they're like, oh my God, the crime seems so bad and we're having so many shootings. You know what I tell them? I haven't seen much of a difference. I've been working these streets since '93, and unfortunately, I haven't seen really any big peaks and valleys in crime. It's pretty much stayed the same for the most part. So this stuff isn't anything new. But, you know, people that, you know, might have been younger or a child when I first came on the job, they weren't aware of what was going on. And now that they're young adults, they're like, oh my God, this is terrible. We have so many shootings and so many robberies. Yeah, we do. It is terrible, but it's more or less more of the same. I can speak on the last almost 25 years. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Yes, Joyce?
What percentage of these types of attacks are conducted by someone who knows the office, from the congregation or something? And what percentage where there is some warning that had people heeded, they could have been prepared?
We're going to touch on that. We're going to have a slide that's going to talk about indicators that you can look for in co-workers or people that frequent, like your church or whatever, that you might want to look out for. And it's not an absolute. There's so much gray area. I wish I could tell you simple black and white things to look for and say, oh my gosh, this guy's going to be a psychopath. There's no clear-cut thing, but we're going to give you indicators to look for, which might be reason for concern to believe that maybe someone needs help, if nothing else. But it could be a pre-indicator that they are planning on doing harm or coming back and doing something like this. And there's a slide for that. Let me just finish with this real quick. I think the next slide might talk about that. This is kind of interesting to look at here. I said police miss 70 or 80% of their shots in dynamic incidents. The bad guy's not usually a skilled shooter, but they actually usually have a higher hit rate. The reason that is kind of like I went back and told you about the initial response to active shooter. It was lock the door and shelter in place. Well, how hard is it when you have a group of people huddled up in a corner to walk up and shoot them? It's not very hard, okay? Where when police are involved in shootings, we have a lot more to worry about. Number one, we have to be responsible for our bullets. So if there's innocent people in the way or behind them, we may not be able to take that shot. But also it's different when you're trying to shoot a target that's also shooting back at you. It's not at a known distance. It's not a stationary target. It could be moving, side to side, laterally, forward and back. So when you have an opponent that's also trying to kill you, it can be harder to kill them by shooting them just because of the dynamics involved in a gunfight. It's very fluid and mobile. So that's why the stats say that police miss 70-80% of their shots. That's true because it's tough to shoot something that's moving, and it might be dim light. You could be blinded by muzzle flash. I know I worked midnight shift for 14 years, and whenever there was gunplay near me, the muzzle flash can blind you for a second. So it might be tough to pick up your sights again. There's all kinds of things that can come into play there. But it kind of talks about the whole thing with messing up his OODA loop. Noise, movement, distance, distractions. Yelling and screaming, throwing things, interrupting his OODA loop, which can enable you to flank him and eventually swarm him or otherwise incapacitate him. Let's go on to the next one, I think. Same thing we just talked about, the survival tactics. Barricading, cover, concealment, getting out if you can, swarming the suspect. We've touched on all these pretty much. This right here, I don't suggest, if you're not familiar with firearms and you're not a gun person and don't know how they operate, if you have the shooter incapacitated or subdued, I don't suggest anybody pick up the gun and try to unload it or handle it, okay? If you're not a gun person, you might, in fact, end up shooting someone by accident or having that gun go off when you don't want it to. So if you're not a gun person, it's okay to maybe slide it away from the guy if someone else has him on the ground, but I wouldn't suggest picking it up and trying to unload it or do anything with it if you're not a gun person. If you are in the guns or you have a similar gun, you know how to operate it, you know how to lock the slide back or otherwise make it safe, do so. But also remember, you don't know when the police are getting there. The last thing you want is to have the police make an entry and you're handling a gun, okay? You're better off leaving it sit. And if the shooter is on the ground being subdued, you might want to stand near the gun so no one else comes near it. But I wouldn't suggest handling that firearm.
And especially don't pick it up and hold him at gunpoint, because like you said, if the cops come in and they see you pointing a gun at, he's the bad guy, but all of a sudden you're the one getting shot because all they know is they're for an active shooter and you have a gun. So.
Not the greatest picture. This is a picture of swarming, and they're trying to get a hold of all his limbs. You see people grabbing his legs. They're trying to grab him by the arms. That just gives you an idea of kind of what it looks like, but you want to grab all 4 limbs and then have other people, trip him or push him or whatever and topple him over and just control him. Okay, how to respond when law enforcement arrives. Of course, our purpose is to stop the active shooter as soon as possible. We're going to proceed directly to an area where the last shots were heard. The first officers to arrive will not stop to help injured persons. It's important to know that. That's not our mission or objective at that point. Our objective is to get in there and stop that threat, i.e. get that active threat or that active shooter. We're going to have rescue teams that are to come in behind us. And initially that's going to also be police officers, okay? You won't see EMS coming in there until that structure or that building is secured. So again, knowledge is power. So if you're incapacitated or you're with someone that's injured, you couldn't get out, and you see the police coming, the first ones you see aren't going to help you. They're going to bypass you. But understand, once the area has been cleared, we're going to have rescue teams of 2 to 4 cops coming in behind us. They're the ones that are going to carry you out or treat you and get you out of the building. So again, it's nice to know that. It's nice to know that, because otherwise you're thinking, what are these cops doing? They're leaving me here. I'm helpless. And it just leads to more despair and panic. And that's the last thing you want to do. So if you know that, hey, the first cops to come in aren't worried about me, but I know when they pass me by, the next group of cops in are going to help me. That's nice knowledge to know. It kind of puts you at ease too. Expect rescue teams comprised of additional officers. The rescue teams will treat and remove any injured persons. They may also call upon able-bodied individuals to assist in removing the wounded from the premises. And I mentioned that before about the walking wounded. Just because you're shot in the arm or shot in the leg doesn't mean you're going to be 100% incapacitated. If you're able to get up and move and walk or help someone else do that, please do. Don't feel like you have to lay there. Last thing is, once you've reached a safe location or an assembly point, you will likely be held in that area by law enforcement until the situation is under control and all witnesses have been identified and questioned. It says don't leave until law enforcement authorities have instructed you to do so. That's more of a guideline than a rule. Do the police want to talk to you once you're out? We sure do. We definitely do. But if you feel the situation is not safe, and even if you're outside the building, it's not safe to stay there, and you can leave, I would leave. Now, I would call county control. You could call 911. Hey, my name is Joe Smith. I was just at 1508 Dairy Street at that church shooting. I got out, but I'm scared to death. I'm going home. Okay, what's your name again? Joe Smith. This is my number. This is my address. You know, the police do want to talk to you. We do want to interview you, but it's not imperative that you stay on scene and when it might not be a totally safe area yet, just so we can talk to you, okay? But just know that please call in and give us at least a name and a number and an address. Number one, we can verify that you're alive, because people that do still stay there that we talk to might say, well, Joe Smith's office is down here. I don't know where he is. Well, dispatch is going to tell us, well, Joe Smith called in. He said he's safe. He said he's going home. This is his number. This is his address. Okay. You know what I mean? So everything works out. Just like with, you know, the kids fleeing the school. You know, it's a hard pill for administrators to swallow in education that we're going to tell the kids to run amok and just leave and flee. But it's a lot better than having them go to a staging area or a rally point at the school where there might be explosives or other shooters standing by to take them out. So when it's all said and done, everything comes out in the wash, and they're going to be accounted for, and they can be questioned later. That's the main point.
Let me touch on one more thing here about responding once law enforcement gets there. Don't be surprised if, get to you in 1 second, sir. Don't be surprised if the secondary team's coming in, if they stand everybody up and they pat everybody down, they search everything. You may even get flex cuffed until you get taken outside or whatever. And that's just to make sure that there's no more threats hiding, because I can be an active shooter. Oh, the cops are here. Throw the gun. Oh, help me! You know, I'm so scared. Meanwhile, I was the bad guy originally. So everybody may get patted down. Probably going to get patted down. May or may not get flex cuffed until you get outside. If you know, so don't be surprised if that happens. So yes, sir. Your question.
Address the exact same thing. If I'm in the room with the guy, the bad guy, and you guys come in to rescue me, you don't know that I'm not the bad guy.
Right.
I should show my hand and not get sensitive when you treat me like I'm the bad guy.
Fingers spread.
I got to get on the ground, I might get cuffed, and you know, you might, you know, I didn't see that up there, but you just.
Yeah. I mean, so you know, I can hide in one room, and you know, I throw the gun, and now I'm the victim, and right.
This is the slide I was talking about. How to respond when law enforcement arrives. Remain calm, easier said than done, I understand. Follow our instructions. Put down any items in your hands. Immediately raise your hands and spread your fingers. Keep hands visible at all times. Avoid making quick movements toward officers, such as holding on to them for safety. Avoid pointing, screaming, or yelling. Do not stop to ask officers for help or direction when they are evacuating. Just proceed in the direction from which the officers are entering the premises. I touched on that already as well. These are things we want to know if and when the situation is available. Like, you know, where's the active shooter now? How many shooters? Physical description. If you know what type of weapon he has, that'd be great. How many people are in the building? Things like we would like to know. You may not be able to do this, but if the opportunity arises, the main thing is location of the shooter, what he looks like, what he's wearing, where he last was. Those are the important things we want to know. But if they're looking for that information, you'll have officers asking you that. And I've been in situations where I've done just that, where I wasn't getting much response because people were shell-shocked, but they were coming out of a building as I was going in, and I'm trying to ask them. I had no information of who the shooter was, and I'm like, hey, where's the shooter? What's he wearing? People are like, just kind of like zombies running past me. So again, easier said than done, but if you're able to keep a cool head and an officer asks you for that information, you know, please give it to us. Like I said, the best intel was live intel. This is going back to what someone asked about indicators. Recognizing potential workplace violence. An active shooter in your workplace may be a current or former employee, a student, or an acquaintance of a current or former employee. Intuitive managers, teachers, and coworkers may notice characteristics of potentially violent behavior in an employee or a student. It says alert your human resources department or your principal if you believe an employee, student, or coworker exhibits potentially violent behavior. Next one. The most important thing of this slide is this quote right here by Theodore Roosevelt. In a moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing is the wrong thing. The worst thing you can do is do nothing. That's something to think about. You don't have to have all the answers, but you have to have a plan and you have to execute it. So all the things we talked about today is just that. That's it in a nutshell. Here's the different indicators of someone who might be prone to violence. If you notice increased use of alcohol or illegal drugs, an unexplained increase in absenteeism, noticeable decrease in attention to appearance or hygiene, outward signs of depression or withdrawal, resistance and overreaction to changes in policy and procedures, repeated violations of company or school policies, increased severe mood swings, noticeably unstable emotional responses, explosive outbursts or anger or rage without provocation. The big one here is suicidal comments about putting things in order, or hey, I'm just about done, things like that. Behavior which is suspect of paranoia, everyone's out to get me kind of thing, or the conspiracy theory. Increasingly talks of problems at home, escalation of domestic problems in the workplace, talk of severe financial problems, talk of previous incidents of violence, empathy with individuals committing violence, that's a big one too. Increase in unsolicited comments about firearms or other dangerous weapons and violent crimes. These are all things you can keep in the back of your brain housing group. Now, one of them alone may not be, an absolute indicator, but I can tell you this, if you pick up on several of these indicators, that's something to be concerned with. So I guess it depends on where you are and where you work, what your course of action should be, i.e. like speaking to an immediate supervisor first and having it run up the chain of command. The big thing is just knowing that, hey, these are indicators. If I start seeing these are a cause for concern. The big thing for me is especially suicidal thoughts, talking about that and showing empathy for people that are committing violent crimes. Because who does that? Who thinks that way? Those are big red flags. The last part here, these are commercially available tools that you can buy, and they're made for outward swinging doors, inward swinging doors, doors with the scissor action at the top. These are like the best ones on the market that I've found, and it takes about 5 seconds to employ them on a door, and it makes them solid. The website is billcode.com. I think it's the same company that came out with the Billcode doors from a basement, okay? They came out with these different tools, and when you buy these, they actually hang on a hanger behind the door. So all of a sudden, if you know you can't get out and you have to barricade, you lock the door, you get one of these, you apply it, it's secure in 5 seconds, and then you can still barricade things behind it, but they aren't getting in. There's a short video for each of these. It's about 15 seconds long that shows how they work. You can go ahead and hit it. This is for outward swinging doors.
Remove device from holder. Position hook over door handle so that it is facing downward as shown. Position bar so that foot pads rest against the face of the door jamb. Spin handle until device is tight against the door handle to secure the door.
That's it. That's it. Put it over the handle against the other door jamb, spin it till it's tight, it's locked. They aren't breaching that door. This one is for inward swinging doors, and the way these are cut out, it's made to catch the door jamb of the outside, and you'll see when they play the video here. This one's great.
Remove device from holder. Lay device on floor behind closed door and slide plates under door. Push handles outward to engage plates on exterior door jamb. Locate hole in bar by sliding the bar as required and insert the pin to secure the device.
Talk about KISS principle. That's great. Anybody can put it on. This is for the scissor action doors. Now, when we went through the instructor course for this, they actually put us in rooms and wanted us to barricade. And we were using airsoft guns, and the guy would come in and try to get us. And I'm like, he's not getting in here. So they put us in a room with this scissor action. And I'm like, hey, I'm smart. I'm taking my belt off. I'm going to strap that around it and pull it tight. There's no way it's going to open. It opened every single time, no matter how we tried to secure that scissor action. Well, this is made just for that, and it's the only tool that I've seen for scissor action doors. And again, this takes about 3 seconds to put on.
Door closers are available in different sizes. When your device arrives, adjust the bolt location to ensure a snug fit on your door closer. To install, simply slide the device over the door closer to secure the door.
That's it. And it's got rubber inserts, so it grabs onto the scissor action and it won't slide. Like if you were like running into that door and trying to pound on it, it's not like that thing's going to slowly come off. Once you put it on there, it's locked on there. But those are the best things I've seen, and they don't cost very much. I think the average cost is like $130 or $160 for one of them. Well, especially if you're an administrator of a workplace building or a church or something like that, that's not going to break the bank. And that might be an option for you guys, what you're talking about in your situation, to have something like that available where you can have that employed in a matter of seconds and at least, keep them from coming in. It's a good idea to have like, things posted saying this facility is under video surveillance. That there alone, if the guy isn't planning on killing himself and he wants to try to escape, he may not think, well, I don't want to hit that church because they have video surveillance throughout. I don't want to be identified. So he might pick the next church. Whether you have video surveillance or not, they're saying it's a good thing to post those signs, telling people, hey, the facility's under video surveillance. I want to touch on one more thing, just food for thought. You know how a lot of schools and churches now have AEDs in the church? If someone has a heart attack, you have something right there. It's a defibrillator so you can get their heart beating again correctly. Another thing you might want to think about putting in a church or a school are simple pieces of trauma gear that can stop bleeding. Because even on the battlefield, most casualties are caused from loss of blood. Okay, you get that arterial bleeding where you hit an artery and the blood's spurting out. There's two things that you need to stop most bleeding. And one is a tourniquet and one is what's called a quick clot, which is a clotting agent. Now this is something new on the market. This is called a rat's tourniquet. And it's nothing more than any other tourniquet, but much easier to use. This was designed by a Special Forces Green Beret. And what's great about this is I can teach you guys how to use this in like 15 seconds, where your typical CAT tourniquet, which is our current military issue tourniquet, stands for Combat Application Tourniquet. It takes practice to know how to use this correctly. And to apply the CAT tourniquet, if you don't practice using it, you probably won't apply it effectively or correctly, okay? And the whole thing with tourniquets, you want to worry about self-aid and buddy aid. So first you want to learn how to apply it to yourself. One hand only, strong arm. One hand only, weak arm. How to apply it to each of your legs. It takes a lot of time and effort and practice to learn how to effectively use these, where this rat's tourniquet, it's real simple. It's a vulcanized piece of rubber with nylon over it. Doesn't create a memory. So as many times as you stretch this out, it goes back to its original shape. But all you do, if he was bleeding arterially from this arm, you have a loop in one end and you have this metal cleat. You wrap it around, you put the tag in through the hole, you pull this tight and cinch it, wrap it a couple times, and then you put it in the cleat, and that's it. It's that simple. Now, what's nice about this is it applies a lot of pressure very quickly, and it stops the distal pulse. Now, what I mean by that is if we had a heartbeat monitor thing we could put on his finger, you would see there's no heartbeat, no distal pulse getting to his fingers. Well, that's what you want when you apply a tourniquet. You want to stop, the bleeding, and if you can stop the distal pulse, that's enough pressure to stop the bleeding, okay? So that's something you can apply to yourself. Again, undo it.
No, I mean,
Okay.
teaching aid. So.
But that's something you can apply with one arm, no problem, and just cleat it off on your leg or anything else. So I would suggest if you're going to get tourniquets for your church or school, get the RATS tourniquet. And RATS, Rapid Application Tourniquet System.
And there's plenty of YouTube videos and all that.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, I will caution you on one thing. There are several competitors that made knockoff RATS tourniquets, and they're not near as good because this vulcanized rubber cord is patented, okay? So I have a knockoff version right here to show people, and this is usually what I let people practice with if they want to practice. We don't have time for that today, but you can see it even looks chintzy, and there's no vulcanized rubber inside, okay? So you want to make sure it's actually a RATS tourniquet, and the patented version has this red tag, and it says RATS Medical right on it. Now, there's several websites that sell this, but you can go directly to RATS website and order these. This is the other beauty of this. The average cost of a cat tourniquet is $30 to $40. One of these brand new is $16. It's actually half the price of what the current military issue is. Now, I can also tell you this. The military is switching to these, but they still have the contract going for the cat tourniquet. Now, all of our special forces and special operations warriors are already carrying these because they get what they want. I actually went to it's called the Sniper Summit in Virginia Beach. He went with me the one year. And it's really interesting. It's snipers from around the world. And we do case studies and talk shop about sniping. And it's awesome. There was SEAL Team 6 guys there, Green Berets from every different group.
Guys that are in some alphabet agency that they won't
Right.
know who they are.
It was awesome. British SAS, Austrian Special Forces, German GSG-9 guys, you name it, the best of the best. And all those special operators were all carrying RATS tourniquets. Now that speaks volumes, because you know and understand they don't deal with anything that's not going to work, and they only carry what's best.
Not that this takes up a lot of room in your pocket, your purse, your backpack, whatever, but that takes up a lot less room. You can carry probably 2 or 3 of those in the same amount that you can carry.
Yep. The last thing I'm going to touch on is combat gauze. This is the quick clot stuff. This stuff here costs maybe $40 for one of these. But if someone's shot like in the torso and they're bleeding, you can't put a tourniquet on their neck or something or around their body, okay? So a tourniquet's only good for extremities. This is good for penetrating wounds, whether it's a gunshot wound or a stab wound in the torso. And what you're actually doing is you're packing the wound with it. So when you open this thing up, it's like a gauze pad about a ½ inch long, and you actually pull it apart, and then you actually pack the wound with your finger. So say if I had a bullet hole in my leg right here, because you could use it on extremities too, I would take the very end of that, stuff it in the hole, and just keep stuffing. And you want to stuff down to the artery and keep stuffing. And the thing's about 3 foot long, and you wouldn't think you'd be able to fit that into a gunshot wound. It fits. And once you get that packed in there, then you apply pressure for 2 minutes, and then it clots the wound, and it's done. It's good to go. But, you know, if you have a handful of these and a handful of RATS tourniquets, at least if, you know, you can't get immediate help, but you're safe because you've barricaded. Say you got hit, but you made it to a room and barricaded. You don't want to bleed out. So if you have these things available, that's something else you can use to sustain life. Because most combat casualties, they end up dying because of loss of blood. You know, now on the same token, our casualty count on the current war on terror would be a lot higher if we didn't have quick clot and tourniquets. You know, through the evolution of medical stuff, we've seen since 9/11 alone, there's less soldiers and Marines and sailors dying because we're actually able to sustain life because of these tools. Well, it's the same for us too. This can here I actually keep with me. When I'm working, it's in the trunk of my car. When I'm not working, it's in my truck. And then I have a bunch of different, they call it IFAKs, individual first aid kits. And I have one that's on my tack vest. I have another smaller one that's in my car. I have one in my office. So no matter where I am, I have this stuff available for me and for my family. You know, if I'm off duty, I'm in my truck, my kids or my wife are with me, and something bad happens, whether it's a car wreck or some other kind of catastrophe, I have a trauma kit with me with everything in there I need, because it may not have immediate help. So just something else you can think about to get for your own personal toolbox.
Kind of back along the line of barricaded. Somebody, you know, whether it's yourself or somebody, one of your friends, coworkers, you get them in a room and barricade. Once the police show up and the scene's contained, it's going to be a very slow, methodical clearing of the rest of the building. So you may be barricaded in that room for a while, and if you're barricaded here, but the threat was stopped way down the hallway, and the police are slowly clearing their way back to you or clearing up to you, you may be in that room for a while. So if you have medical stuff, that at least buy yourself or somebody else time until the police can get